Good morning. I'm Alice Newland, co-president of the League of Women Voters of Manatee County. On behalf of the League, I welcome you to our Hot Topics presentation today, Homelessness in Florida and Manatee County, Changing Laws and Local Responses. Today's program is being recorded and will be available on our website, lwvmanatee.org. Any use of the recording other than showing it in its entirety must get the permission of the League. At the end of the presentations by our speakers, they will be taking questions. Please put your questions in chat for Tina Juliette, our social issues co-chair, and if possible, state which of our speakers the question is for. The program today delves into the current state of homelessness, the shifting legal landscape, and responses being implemented here in Manatee County. With expert speakers and panel discussions, you'll gain valuable insights into the policies affecting our community, discover how new laws are shaping the future for those experiencing homelessness, and the role of our local organizations play in providing support. Our first speaker is Bryan Cherry, and he's partner in PinPoint Results LLC. With nearly 2 decades of experience in the process, Bryan is a regular fixture in the halls of Florida's Capitol, representing client interests before Florida's elected and appointed officials. Bryan began his legislative career working as legislative committee staff in the Florida Senate and the Florida House of Representatives, concluding his public service following his role as chief of staff for Speaker Pro Tem. During this time, Bryan gained valuable, extensive experience in a variety of policy and budget areas and built a robust understanding of the legislative process that he regularly leverages to advance the interests of his firm's clients. Bryan has vast experience in advocating for multiple industry interests, including affordable housing, child welfare, education, guardianship, healthcare, homelessness, technology, and transportation, with an emphasis on health and human services arena, effectively assisting Florida not-for-profit and for-profit entities to achieve their legislative priorities. Specific to today's discussion, Bryan has represented the Florida Coalition to End Homelessness for the past decade, advocating on behalf of the coalition's annual appropriation and policy priorities. Our second speaker, Taylor Neighbors, is Chief Executive Officer of Suncoast Partnership to End Homelessness. The mission of Suncoast Partnership is to prevent and end homelessness in Sarasota and Manatee counties through collaborative work with community leaders, service providers, and concerned citizens by promoting community engagement, awareness, funding initiatives, and a system of care that provides a path from homelessness to housing. Taylor has been with Suncoast Partnership since 2017 as program manager, then grants and contracts manager, then as chief administrative officer, and has recently been promoted to chief executive officer. Taylor has also worked in 211 Suncoast, Inc. as a case specialist and Early Learning Coalition of Sarasota County as a family advocate. Our third speaker is Amanda Ballard, Manatee County Commissioner and a member of the Manatee Homelessness Task Force. Amanda moved from upstate South Carolina to Manatee County just after graduating law school in 2014. Amanda has spent her career as an attorney in the local child welfare system and has a passion for helping children and the underserved community. She is on the board of directors with Feeding Empty Tummies, Little Tummies in Palmetto, and volunteers with the Junior League of Manatee County. Amanda and her husband, David, have 3 young children. So, Bryan?
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate the introduction and opportunity to discuss today's topic with everyone. I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation on the topic today that I was asked to present on. I'll do that now. So, Bryan Cherry with PinPoint Results. PinPoint is a government consulting firm. So, we are lobbyists and consultants. We are hired by our clients to represent their organizations or their companies before the Florida executive and legislative branches. So, whether that could be for appropriations that the organization is seeking or uh, substantive law policy change at the state of Florida government level. That is what we help our clients with. And I represent the Florida Coalition to End Homelessness. The membership of that organization includes the local continuum of care lead agencies, which includes the partnership Manatee Sarasota continuum of care lead agency that Taylor is in. And we've represented that organization for the past decade. And we have worked on a number of policy issues from completely rewriting the homelessness statute, Chapter 420, to working on recent legislation that was passed this past legislative session, and that included allowing those persons with lived experience, lived homeless experience, who may have had a criminal record in the past, which would have prevented them from obtaining employment, um, for those during the background screening process for that not to be held against them when they are seeking jobs within a continuum of care lead agency or one of the umbrella agencies, given their experience firsthand with homelessness. That was a big piece of legislation that we just passed this recent year. Those are a few examples of a few of the policy bills that we have run as an organization. Certainly, from an appropriations perspective, there are a number of appropriations that we focus on for the coalition specifically. So those are state dollars that go directly to the continuing care lead agencies via the challenge grant and staffing grant. That's just a little bit about what we've done with our representation with the organization for the last decade. But I was asked today to provide a high-level overview of legislation that passed during the 2024 legislation. That was House Bill 1365, unauthorized public camping and public sleeping. Um, this was not legislation that the Coalition to End Homelessness introduced, meaning we did not ask that the bill be filed, but um, we did have a number of meetings with legislators, and I can get into a little bit of that in just a moment. So I just want to give a high-level overview of what the bill does do, what it doesn't do, what some communities are doing in response to the legislation. So first and foremost, it prohibits a county or municipality from authorizing the public camping or sleeping in certain areas and jurisdictions without a Department of Children and Families certification. So as I mentioned, the bill was passed in 2024 and signed by the governor into law. Um, every provision, with the exception of the civil action provision, became law on October 1st of 2024, and the civil action provision became law on January 1st of 2025, so just a month ago. What is public camping or sleeping? Well, the bill defines the definition of lodging or residing overnight in a temporary outdoor habitation used as a dwelling or living space with evidence of a tent or some other type of temporary shelter. Must have the presence of bedding or pillows or storage for personal belongings. Um, it also includes lodging or residing overnight in an outdoor space without a tent or other temporary shelter. I think that's important that those camping for recreational purposes on property that's designated for such purposes, that does not fall under the definition or the intent of this bill. Also, lodging or residing, even if you are homeless, in a motor vehicle that is registered and is insured and it's parked in a place that it can lawfully be, that is also allowed in this bill. That provision was actually previously written into the draft language or the original bill rather, to preclude those sleeping overnight in motor vehicles. But there was some powerful testimony during the committee bill process from a single mother with two children who could not go to certain shelters out of concern for a previous relationship that she had, domestic violence issue, and so she felt for the safety of her and her children that was going to be the appropriate place for her to be. Um, so with that powerful testimony, that provision within the law was allowed. What can a county do? So a county can designate property, or a municipality may designate property within the county for public camping or sleeping for no longer than 1 year. Um, what I want to be sure is understood here, it doesn't require that a county or municipality must designate public camping or sleeping for this purpose. Um, However, it says, well, if you want to have a recommendation, here is what we would recommend. And this has been commonly referred to as an encampment. And it gives very outlines, requires minimum standards and procedures. Fiscally constrained counties are exempt from these minimum standards if they can prove that it's going to cause financial harm. Um, Things that you would expect: safety, security protocols, access to bathrooms and running water. It also requires that these designated public spaces coordinate with the managing entity to provide access to mental health and substance abuse treatment, and no drugs or alcohol are allowed, of course, in these facilities. So I mentioned earlier the civil action component to the bill. This became effective January 1, and it allows residents or business owners or the Attorney General to file a civil action to enforce the prohibition on unauthorized public camping. And so, what that would do, what that's going to look like in the court, um, we don't know yet. It has not, to my knowledge, there has not been a civil action brought um, against the local community that I am aware of. There's certain protocols that must be followed here. The local municipality or county has 5 days after receiving the written notice of the violation um, to address it and cure the alleged violation. And if they haven't, then that can proceed into a civil action period, which will then play out in the courts, of course. There are a few exemptions to when civil action can be brought. There's declaration of a state of emergency declared by the governor, um, which a lot of obviously it made sense. If this is going to be a bill that was going to pass, there need to be certain provisions and that was certainly a justifiable one. Criminal penalties. Are there criminal penalties? So the bill alone does not outline any criminal penalties, and the legislators that we met with were certainly quick to say there are no criminal penalties in this bill. However, that does not at all prevent local enforcement from arresting individuals who violate the law. And so, we'll talk a little bit about what some of the communities are doing in response to this. But the bill itself does not contain any criminal penalties. Of course, that does not prohibit local communities from enforcing the law, however. So what are the impacts to local government? We talked about certainly there's going to be some fiscal impacts from a civil action. We don't know yet what that will look like monetarily in the courts, what can be awarded for that, for example. There's going to be a fiscal impact if the local municipalities construct and designate property and maintain to the minimum standards. There's certainly going to be a cost involved if the local governments decide that one of these designated areas that they're going to invest in is an option for them. What are we seeing in other, across the state? So we've seen cities and counties, they've begun to pass local ordinance prohibiting public camping and sleeping. And many of these local jurisdictions have been quick to say, while that they don't agree with the legislation, but the law is the law, and we need these ordinances on our books to comply with the new state law. So they're more than listed here: City of Gainesville, City of Kissimmee, City of St. Cloud, Osceola, Seminole County, City of Fort Myers. They've already passed these ordinances. I know Lee and Collier were looking at passing similar ordinances. They may have already done so since I put this slide deck together. But this has been a trend that we're seeing with local communities passing these ordinances. So there is these ordinances on the book to comply with state law. We're also seeing many local governments reach out to their homeless continuum of care lead agencies. So, for example, I know Taylor's on here from the Manatee Sarasota partnership. They are actively working with their COC to develop plans to end unsheltered homelessness. I think it's very important that in the coalition we took this stance during the bill process. Again, we did not ask that this legislation be filed, and we certainly did not agree with everything in the bill. We'll just say. But one thing we did appreciate is the conversation that started because of this legislation and the spotlight that it shined on the unsheltered homelessness in our state, which has been an ongoing issue for many decades and has been increasing, in fact, since COVID. So we took that as an opportunity to share with the legislators, the bill sponsors, governor's staff, examples of funding that the COCs are receiving, whether through the challenge grant or through federal funding, ways that we can work towards ending unsheltered homelessness. One of the provisions in the bill last year, well, not within the bill, but in the appropriations bill, rather, the legislature provided $10 million specific to unsheltered homelessness. That was provided via a add-on to the challenge grant, the homeless challenge grant. So the state provides $20 million in recurring general revenue, and those grants are made specifically available to the continued care lead agencies. They added an additional $10 million non-recurring to the challenge grant last year, specifically for unsheltered homelessness. Not to build an encampment necessarily. It certainly could go towards those initiatives if that was the local ordinances or the local jurisdictions and COC's plan. but unsheltered individuals. And so we were happy to see that last year. We'd like to see additional $10 million for that to be recurring in the overall state budget for the unsheltered. But that was one positive, I guess you could take away from the legislation was that appropriation. Again, in no way was that appropriation meant to address all the provisions in 1365. But I did want to highlight that there was a very positive conversation and understanding, education of the legislature during this bill process that did ultimately end in getting some appropriations for the unsheltered. So, lastly, we're looking at future legislation, what that may look like. I get asked this question quite a bit. Is there going to be a follow-up 1365, or is there going to be a glitch bill, right, to 1365? And I'd say it's to be determined. The governor has already come out. He's hinted that, hey, the legislature could come back and they could even strengthen the legislation now in light of a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that would provide stricter enforcement. And for those of you not familiar with that Supreme Court ruling, the court ruled 6-3. It was an Oregon case which affirmed local restrictions on public sleeping and encampments. So those who were behind last year's legislation felt empowered by the Supreme Court's ruling. They felt that it supported the law and ended any debate whether that law was legal or not. And so whether the legislature does anything with that remains to be seen. Right now, the governor and the legislature are not on best terms, if you will. If you've been following in Tallahassee, while the Republicans have complete control of the Florida House and the Florida Senate and the governor's mansion, they are not seeing eye to eye right now on immigration legislation that the governor called the legislature into special session on just a couple weeks ago. And the governor wants it to be stronger. He wants more authority over immigration. But that's called certainly some friction between the governor and the legislature. And so the legislature is now, they're flexing their muscle because the Republicans have a super majority in the House and Senate, which means they can override any of the governor's vetoes that he has, any appropriations that he's vetoed. And so right now the legislature has created work groups to examine vetoes that the governor's made. It is, in simple terms, a mess in Tallahassee. So we'll see. If the governor wants legislation 1365, I'd say that the legislature probably doesn't feel like they need to do anything with it. Now, if the legislature has their own plans, I do know that there were certainly recommendations made to the legislature. They were reviewing them. Whether there's going to be a follow-up bill, we'll see. But right now, there has been no legislation filed. So that's where we are ahead of the March session. Session will begin on March the 4th and will conclude on May the 2nd, at least the regular session. Let's hope we don't get too many more special sessions. So that's where we are. So that's the gist of my presentation. I understand that we are going to hold for questions. And so I'll stand by for those after everybody presents.
Thank you, Bryan. That's correct. The questions will come at the end of all the presentations. So, Taylor, we will hear about the local Manatee, Sarasota work that your organization and how this impacts that.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I'm going to be talking a little bit about our organization. what we're doing in the community, how we're collaborating with the different agencies. So I will do my best to give you a high-level overview of that. As mentioned previously, we are the HUD designated lead agency in Manatee and Sarasota counties when it comes to leading the efforts to prevent and end homelessness. One of the things that we are responsible for is the facilitation, the coordination, and the evaluation of the homeless crisis response system that we have in our area, which encompasses a variety of different pieces. So you have prevention, which is trying to keep people from coming into the system. Diversion, early intervention, working with those that do become homeless to quickly get them out of the system so they do not become long-term chronically homeless. We have street outreach efforts in both counties, coordinated entry, which I will talk a little bit further about in just a minute, emergency shelter, and housing interventions like rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. We're the collaborative applicant when it comes to federal and state funding. So as Bryan mentioned, the challenge grant, that is something that comes to our office, and we subcontract with the different providers in the community to basically set up projects that are designed to help folks experiencing homelessness or to prevent those from entering the system and becoming homeless. With that comes a lot of invoicing and reimbursement for the expenses that our providers are incurring, as well as monitoring their projects to make sure that they are in compliance, they're doing what they agreed to do, and so forth and so on. We operate a federally funded database, which is Community Services and Information System, or CSIS. Reporting is very important, and being able to see that data is so key to be able to tell the story in our community, to be able to say how many folks are experiencing homelessness or at risk of becoming homeless. What is the demographic information? What are some of the gaps in our community? What are things that we're doing well? And then allowing our agencies that utilize this system to be able to coordinate with one another, see where their client is going and receiving services, and most importantly, not duplicating efforts. So with that comes a lot of training. Our service providers in the community are utilizing this system, so they have to be trained on how to use this, how to get their projects set up, how to enter their data, how to pull reports. Like I said, the data is really what tells the story in our community and helps us make those really informed decisions when it comes to funding and things of that nature. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is our coordinated entry system, which is one of our key components of our homeless crisis response system. So when we have an individual or a family or a senior or a veteran that's experiencing literal homelessness, they can go to one of our 8 access points throughout the 2 counties that we serve. So in Manatee County, you have turning points, and you also have Salvation Army Manatee. And then we have a worker in our office that serves as an access point. So an access point is basically a place where folks can go and they can be assessed basically regarding their circumstances. So like I said, anyone that's experiencing literal homelessness can go to this access point. The first conversation that's going to be had is a diversion conversation. How can we help this person problem solve and try to resolve their situation without having to bring them into our homeless crisis response system? If that doesn't work, then we move on to a pretty intensive assessment of the client to really assess their acuity of need, to kind of understand their homelessness history, if they have disabilities, what does their housing history look like, so forth and so on. So once a person completes that assessment, it then comes over to our office. We ensure the data is correct. If we have questions, we go back to the person that did the access point. If all is a go, the data is correct, we put that person on our community by name list. From there, we're able to basically prioritize those for housing interventions, whether it's a rapid rehousing project where folks can receive rental assistance and case management for up to 2 years, or a more intensive, like a permanent supportive housing option where you have folks receiving pretty much for an extended period of time, rental assistance and case management. That is for our high level of acuity folks that really are not going to be able to sustain independently without some sort of assistance. Sometimes we receive vouchers from the housing authority, and we're able to pull people from this by name list and connect them to a housing voucher to end their homelessness. To give you an idea, right now in Manatee County, we have 355 households that are experiencing literal homelessness, have gone to an access point. We've been able to identify them, and they're waiting for a housing intervention. Most of those households are predominantly men and white men. We have veterans. We're doing pretty well in the veteran population. We only have 15 veterans in Manatee County that we've been able to identify that are literally homeless. But we have 147 senior citizens that are experiencing literal homelessness in Manatee County, of which 89 are chronically homeless. And what that means is if a person is chronically homeless, they've experienced homelessness for a year or more, or 4 or more times in the last 3 years, and they also struggle with a disability. We have 32 families in Manatee County that are experiencing literal homelessness and are on our community by name list. Like I said, it's all about being literally homeless. So that doesn't take into account the folks that are, couch hopping or staying doubled up or paying for their own hotel. These are folks that we've been able to identify on the streets, the unsheltered, those that are sheltered in emergency shelter, or may have an agency paying for their hotel or motel. So it doesn't capture, I'm sure there's much more folks out there that are experiencing a housing crisis, but we're dealing with a literal homelessness, and we haven't probably even begun to touch some of those that are out there that haven't been connected with our system for various reasons. So that's why it's important that we coordinate with our outreach teams in Manatee County and ensure that we're able to identify these folks. And if they would like housing intervention, we get them connected with this assessment so that we can at least identify them, know who they are, and then when an opportunity comes up for a housing intervention, we're able to prioritize those folks. Now, we are always probably going to have limited resources. That's just the way it goes. So we really have to prioritize those folks that are highest acuity of need and cannot resolve on their own or with minimal interventions. One of the things that we do when we have folks that are on our community by name list or we're outreaching to folks is we come together with our partners from the different agencies and we hold case conferencing. We have case conferencing for our families, our veterans, our youth, and our individuals. And this is a time really for our service providers to come together and brainstorm ways to resolve a person's homelessness. A lot of times we run into very difficult cases where we're not really sure what to do with this person, and we come together and try to find those solutions. Collaboration is key in our work. We couldn't do it without our partners in the community and those wonderful case managers that dedicate so much of their time and energy to try to resolve the homeless situation of the clients that they're working with. With that being said, our organization a couple years ago, back in 2022, started the Suncoast Housing Collaborative. And what that was is basically a partnership with social service agencies and the landlords in our community. To be a part of the Suncoast Housing Collaborative, an agreement had to be signed. And that was signed by landlords and then the participating social service agencies with the clients. The landlords that agreed to be part of the Suncoast Housing Collaborative basically received incentives to be a part of this. So in terms of how we kind of brought the landlords in, is we said, hey, if you can relax some of your rental criteria. A lot of landlords, focus heavily on criminal history, if someone has evictions, credit scores, incomes, things of that nature. So we said, if you're willing to relax your rental criteria, we can connect you with clients and we can provide incentives. So when landlords would sign on, they would receive a sign-on bonus. When they would lease up with one of our clients, then they would receive a lease signing bonus. So with that initiative, we were able to get about 34 landlords that were willing to work with us. At one point, we did have to put some landlords on a wait list, and we were able to house close to 100 households. We temporarily had to stop the collaborative due to staffing shortages and things of that nature, but we now have a dedicated person in our office who will be restarting the collaborative. So like I said, it is a wonderful partnership between landlords and then our case managers in the community to get our clients connected with housing, incentivize those landlords, and then provide the wraparound case management for up to a year while the client is in that landlord's property. A lot of the landlords that agreed to be a part of this were the mom and pops. It was a little bit difficult with some of the, major corporations that really can't relax some of those rental criterias, but the mom and pops were very willing to work with us. So we will be re-engaging with our landlords that have been a part of this and then bringing in new landlords that want to be a part of this. We are part of the Manatee County Homeless Task Force, which is comprised of a number of our partners from the Manatee County government, the homeless outreach teams, Salvation Army, the school board, so forth and so on. And what we've done over the last almost 2 years now is take that roadmap from the Florida Housing Coalition and start working on looking at the various components of our system and where we need to refine those areas and so forth. And then really what we've shifted to now is looking at the senior population. As I mentioned previously, we have 147 households in Manatee County that are seniors, 55 and above, experiencing literal homelessness. And what are we doing as a community to try to help those seniors? There's an alarming number of folks that are seniors that are right on that edge of becoming homeless. So how are we working as a community to prevent that? So we're looking at funding, we're looking at the resources in the community, trying to bring everyone together so that we can basically build a network to support these folks and either get them off the streets or, prevent them from coming into the system. In summary, basically, like I said, it's collaboration. We have to be able to work effectively with our partners in the community, whether it's the street teams and helping people get into hotbeds at the Salvation Army, or it's connecting them with an access point where they can get an assessment, or connecting them with a housing intervention like rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing to end their homelessness. Being at the table, being involved in conversations. Like I said, we're the lead agency. We are tasked with facilitating the homeless crisis response system in conjunction with our partners. Supporting our continuum of care is really what we do, leading that way and always refining the homeless crisis response system. And we do that through our data and looking at that and, making those data informed decisions. So we're always looking to build and maintain those partnerships. So if anyone has any questions about joining the continuum of care, I'm happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. And Amanda, thank you. Good. And go ahead and tell us what's local.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for having me today. And thank you, Taylor, and our other guest, Mr. Cherry, for giving all of that kind of background information, which really gives me the opportunity to focus on what we're doing here locally. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. So I guess I'll start with why this is such an area of passion for me personally. And then I'll go a little bit into what the county is currently doing with regard to homelessness response. So as was stated in my introduction, I was a child welfare attorney from 2014 up to 2022 when I was elected as a county commissioner. As a child welfare attorney, I worked for the Department of Children and Families representing the state of Florida in abuse and neglect cases. Many of those cases involved families that were struggling with issues of affordable housing and issues of homelessness, along with substance abuse concerns. So during that time, I saw in Manatee County a real lack of emphasis on those issues and kind of a lack of understanding of the scope of the issue that we were dealing with here in Manatee County. Unfortunately, I saw families over and over again who you would have a mom who would get out of an abusive relationship. She would get sober, and she'd do everything that the state had asked her to do to regain custody of her children. And then she would be waiting an extra 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to regain custody because she couldn't find an affordable and safe place to live. And the state of Florida is not going to give you custody of those children back unless you have somewhere safe, stable, that those children can go, which is fair, but it's a really kind of intractable problem. Unfortunately, over the years that I worked with DCF, I saw that problem just get worse and worse. The time periods that these families were waiting to be reunited were getting longer. And then also I was seeing at the same time, housing affordability outside of that context of our really struggling families get worse and worse. So we would see young attorneys that I was working with who, when I first started working, it wasn't a concern for them to afford rent. However, by the time 2020, 2021 came around, our newest attorneys were actually having to leave the world of child welfare or leave Manatee County because they were unable to afford rent. So that really made me passionate about the issue. And so when I came in and was elected to county commission, I was determined that I was going to be focused on issues relating to addiction, relating to families, relating to homelessness, and relating to housing affordability. And that was before grants passed, before HB 1365. I was determined that those were the issues that I was ready to focus on in Manatee County. And I was really excited to find that we actually had some really amazing staff at Manatee County who were just kind of looking for a champion on the county commission to really push the issues forward. We had a ton of great outreach because outreach is kind of low cost, low barrier to get started. And so you had these really passionate staff who were doing this great outreach, finding these people who needed help. And then the question was, then where do we go? What do we actually connect these people to for services? The COC does an excellent job, but obviously their resources are limited, and so the county really had to come forward and prioritize this issue. And I've been really, really blessed and lucky that my fellow commissioners, both previous and now the set of new commissioners, have really allowed me to kind of take the lead on the issue and just really push it. So currently, just in response to 1365, we have not passed a local ordinance at this point. We're going to be in the process of working with all of our local municipalities, and our strategies are in line. We're not going to have a public camping area as contemplated by 1365, but I do want to tell you about the global response that we've got toward dealing with homelessness in Manatee County. So, and I'll just also say I'm really excited to get the collaborative restarted. I think that is a really excellent way that we can work with those landlords who maybe they're having difficulty getting units filled, and so we can kind of work together and make it a win-win. So that I think is something that you really can't underestimate what a big impact it can actually have for so many people. So we've got several different initiatives that are all kind of in different stages. So I'll start with the two that have already gotten a little bit more traction, and those are Tunnel to Towers and Helping Up Mission. So Tunnel to Towers is an organization that provides permanent supportive housing for veterans and first responders. We have approved there. The county donated land to that organization for them to build that permanent supportive housing for our veterans and first responders, 122 units. They should be breaking ground, I believe, this month to get that started, and then opening, I believe, sometime next year. Now, that being said, as Taylor said, we don't have a lot of literally homeless veterans. However, we do have potential first responders, and we also have a lot of those people who are veterans and first responders who are living in poverty and are on the edge. They're just right there. They don't know where that next month's rent is coming from. And so those people are going to be really perfect folks to go into Tunnel to Towers, where they'll have all those wraparound services that they need. They'll have transportation up to the Bay Pines Hospital. So we're really excited to get that one started. The next uh, partnership that we have going that I'm really, really excited about is with Helping Up Mission. So one of the issues that I kept seeing during my time with DCF was the need for long-term treatment for substance abuse. So there is a whole lot of research out there that tells you that for people who are struggling with chronic homelessness, many times about 75 to 80% of those people are struggling with a substance abuse or a mental health concern that's underlying their homelessness. And so really we have to treat those underlying issues for those individuals to be successful and for their recovery to be successful. So giving someone who's struggling with that underlying mental health or substance abuse, if you're just giving them a housing voucher, it's really not going to solve the issue unless you have some major wraparound services available. So we started working with an organization called Helping Up Mission. They are a year-long treatment program. They are very intensive. They're located up in Baltimore. I'm going to very quickly go through our other strategies. So we have Fresh Start Manatee, which will be run by the sheriff's office. That'll be for males. We will have Under One Roof, which is a shelter for women. And then we are very hopeful that the Salvation Army at that point will have a lot more bandwidth to deal with our families who are experiencing homelessness. So I could talk about this, to be honest, for a good hour just myself. But if you have questions or would like to talk further, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Tina, why don't you unmute yourself, and do we have questions?
We have a lot of questions, so I'm going to do my best to both consolidate and paraphrase. The first one is for Bryan, and it's kind of a lump. So Commissioner Ballard spoke about how Manatee County doesn't currently plan to implement a new ordinance, but we know that some of the other municipalities have. Anna Maria, Bradenton, Ordinance 4056. So the question is, what are you seeing communities do in terms of the actual enforcement of the laws? What are you seeing as being the impact to the homeless? Are they just enacting the ordinances to comply, or what do you know about how the laws are actually being enforced and how the unsheltered folks are being impacted?
So I can kind of answer that. I am in Tallahassee. I'm not statewide. I do represent a statewide organization, and we actually have a discussion today at 2 to kind of what are we hearing, right? I haven't heard of mass arrest or anything like that. I've heard a few communities of sweeping, kind of going out and sweeping out these areas where there has been very clear evidence of groups, public sleeping and camping, right? But I haven't heard, beyond the local ordinances being passed and the sweeping of these areas, any type of enforcement beyond that. That certainly, could be more than that. But of 67 counties, I'm in one.
Right.
And so, yeah, no one's let me know if there are any major issues occurring with this at this time.
Thanks, Bryan. And another one for Bryan, and then we'll see if we have some time permitting for Taylor or Commissioner Ballard. What would you have as suggested recommendations or any advocacy kinds of activities for us or for the other communities that you're representing?
Yeah, great question. Each community is different. Every single county is going to be different. None are the same. Miami-Dade certainly not. Escambia County, and so every community is going to have different ways that they're going to address their homelessness and their unsheltered. The councilwoman mentioned substance abuse, mental health. That's a huge component here. While it doesn't represent every individual that's homeless, it certainly is a big percentage of the population that may have those co-occurring issues. And so every community is going to have great organizations. The best thing that I would advise, if I could give you one piece of advice from a collaboration perspective, is communicate with the local continuum of care, right? Who's responsible for they are the designated by HUD responsible for the continuum of care plan. And they draw down annually between all 67 counties $130 million to the state annually. And so there needs to be a coordination of providers in this space with your local or elected officials, not at the state level, but at the local county and city level, on what are our plans, how are we going to address this, what funding is available. And so that would be my advice. This is not a one shoe fits all, right? Every community is going to need to address their local needs differently. And some may be the same, but certainly not a one shoe fits all. From an advocacy perspective, if we're talking at the state level, we need more dollars for unsheltered. I mean, we need more dollars available to go to our communities for the unsheltered. So we'd love to see more added to the state general revenue challenge grant. Provides very flexible funding. Back in 2015, when we revived this grant, it was receiving $0 recurring in the state budget. Today, it's receiving over $20 million recurring. And these are the COCs are eligible to apply for these grants. And it really helps fill those gaps in the system where, a lot of times the federal funding that comes down, while we're extremely grateful for that funding, there are a lot of strings attached. It can be a very tedious process. And so what the challenge grant does is allows the local communities to help address some of these needs. So that would certainly be number one for me. I know our organization is going to be pushing that this year. And of course, we're mindful of any legislation that's filed this session. We'll certainly be monitoring and active as we need to be.
Thanks, Bryan. And that's a great input too, because I know our community uses the challenge grant as well. I think we have time for another question or two. So one for Taylor, and then perhaps Commissioner would want to weigh in as well. So the question is, what impacts are service providers seeing, and how are groups like yourselves and law enforcement communicating with the people experiencing homelessness about, what's coming and how it might be impacting them?
Yeah, so our service providers, have definitely seen an uptick in the number of folks that are coming in. In Sarasota County right now, we don't really have family shelter services. So some of our families may be going to Manatee County to receive services at the Salvation Army Manatee. So that is problematic because Manatee folks are, trying to get into shelter as well. But like I said, there is this uptick. And the biggest thing that I just keep going back to is we have to be able to identify folks and be able to have them go through that assessment so that we know that they are in need, because that is going to really help us, make data informed decisions based on, how many folks were, experiencing homelessness, what's their acuity of need, how do we, prioritize folks for different types of interventions. So the folks that, may need more intensive services like the permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, things like that. And then the folks that are kind of like in the middle, and then the folks that really just need, help with first, last, and security, or maybe they have, a relative that they can, be reunited with in a different county. So identifying those folks, making sure that we're all collaborating. As one, we are operating under a housing first mentality to make sure that housing is the forefront. I get there's a lot of, issues that are going on, maybe the person doesn't have a job or they have, mental health, substance abuse, thinking about, getting this person into housing and then wrapping those services around them. And then really working with our street outreach teams. I mean, they are the boots on the ground. They're going out to the folks that are unsheltered and really trying to bring them into services in the system and being able to identify, making sure that we are, not duplicating efforts. That's why we do have this collaborative system so that we can see, okay, this person is receiving services at this organization and so forth, and utilizing those beds that are designated by the homeless outreach teams at our different shelters in our area. We've had a great relationship with law enforcement in both counties. They're very well aware of how the system works. They all act as access points so they can go out right there when they're talking to someone and get that assessment done and identify them.
Thanks, Taylor. And I think Alice says we have time for one last question that I think directed primarily to Commissioner Ballard. And, back to this theme of how is this impacting the folks experiencing homeless, especially unsheltered. What are your thoughts about how the county plans to enforce the laws? We know that there's a shortage of shelter beds. And so in the current capacity situation and no designated area, what is the current approach for law enforcement, if you can speak to that at all?
Sure. So just quickly, I will say on the side of advocacy, we are looking aggressively to expand our shelter capacity. So most of these initiatives that I've talked about, they are directed at aggressively and quickly expanding capacity at shelters. So our strategy, really, I don't think that we're going to be able to arrest our way out of homelessness. I think that what we need to do is ensure that we have shelter available for these people. And so we've requested $1 million for a state appropriation for our Fresh Start Manatee project, which is a project that is going to basically be it'll be run by the sheriff's office. You'll have all the wraparound services that someone would need to get back on their feet. Additionally, if there's someone who's constantly getting arrested for homelessness related offenses, this will give them the opportunity to potentially work through, get those charges dropped, and get on the path to homelessness, working with our COC to find them something appropriate and more long term. So we're not looking to throw these people in jail. We're looking to work with them to aggressively expand shelter capacity and to provide people with the services that they need.
So it seems that there's some discretion in this interim, period until these shelters come online.
We are absolutely trying our best to expand shelter capacity as quickly as possible, so that we're not kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to complying with the state law.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner. And I think it's back to you, Alice.
That is. Thank you, Bryan, Taylor, and Amanda for your enlightening presentations. We encourage all of you to share the video of this presentation and it will be posted today or tomorrow, and the link will be available on our Facebook as well as our website. Our league has some excellent programs that we hope you will join. Our website, lwvmanatee.org, you can go to the calendar and see upcoming events and action team meetings. On that same homepage, if you have not already done so, you can join the league. If you wish to get involved with homelessness and affordable advocacy through the league, our social issues action team is very actively working on that advocacy. Please put your name and email in chat to one of the co-hosts. Check out our website, lwvmanatee.org. Today at 4:30, we have the Government Action Team meeting. The next Tuesday, not 2 days, but the Tuesday, the 18th at 4 p.m., we have the Education Action Team, and at Thursday, the 20th, we have the Natural Resources Action Team meeting. On the Natural Resource Action Team, we have a special guest, Deborah Worth, who's Manatee County's Environmental Lands Program Manager, and she's going to be speaking about the lands acquisition program, what properties are up for purchase, what criteria they use, what ones have been submitted, but what reasons they're not making the top of the list. Our next hot topics is March 10th at noon, and the topic is chemicals and our drinking water. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I will